There has never been a better time to be a fan of Marvel Comics. The comics are now being printed with all kinds of new characters and new interpretations of old characters. Not to mention the overwhelming success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the games, which are pretty sparse nowadays. And don't get me wrong, I love Spider-Man, but he has gotten more than his needed share of games over the years. Other characters deserve the spot in the sun sometimes, which is why I loved the old Ultimate Alliance games. Back in the day, the original two Ultimate Alliance games served as some of my first introductions to the Marvel characters. Alongside the Fantastic Four game, it helped to establish a love for these characters that is deeply rooted in me. So, now after 10 years, we finally have a sequel to the games that helped establish me as a Marvel fan. Does this new game stack up against the originals, or does the series deserve to be reshelved? Let's find out when I look at Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. Let's get into this. Initially announced at the Game Awards in 2018, Ultimate Alliance 3 was met with many mehs and people hoping that they'd get more from Nintendo. But me? I was doing backflips in the dressing room of my school play. A new Ultimate Alliance, but also developed by Koei Tecmo, the ones who did Hyrule Warriors and have all these other games that I've invested so much time into. It seemed like a match made in heaven. So when the time came out, I bought the game and the expansion pass and have now promptly played the shit out of it and will continue to play the shit out of it. The story of Ultimate Alliance 3 starts with who else? The Guardians of the Galaxy. These guys are cruising along when they find an empty ship, and it turns out to have Nebula in it. They fight, she loses, and the Guardians move on. They then find Ronan the Accuser. They fight, he loses. Turns out Ronan had the Infinity Stones, and was safeguarding them from Proxima Midnight, one of the members of the Black Order, or the Children of Thanos, who are doing his dirty work. Star-Lord, with his infinite intellect, decides to teleport them to the raft, and hilarity ensues, kicking off a mad dash between the Black Order and our makeshift alliance to get the other Infinity Stones. If you don't know the Black Order, or these guys, they're Thanos' adopted children in a sense, his henchmen, the aforementioned Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Cole Obsidian, Ebony Maw, and Supergiant. These guys serve as the game's main villains, similarly to the movie Infinity War. These guys do the dirty work for Thanos, who looms in the background for a while. However, if you think this game is just gonna be a ripoff of the movies that just did the Infinity Gauntlet plotline, you'd be wrong. This game's plot isn't very involved. It's similar to the other Ultimate Alliance games, where the plot only serves as a means to get you to meet these new characters and other new places. It's like a best bits of the Marvel Universe. Most of the time this works. However, sometimes when you get done in areas, you wonder why the Alliance even bothered to go there in the first place. One of my first grievances with this game is the game's cutscenes. Of course, the game doesn't actually have your squad of 4 characters in the cutscenes, but this creates a disconnect between the cutscenes and the gameplay. However, all things considered, this is a pretty minor grievance. Every character still has their moment to shine in the cutscenes, and the story isn't too involved, but it doesn't need to be. This game has an art style that I think is going underappreciated by the masses. Rather than shoot for a realistic art style that ends up looking like everything else on the market, Square Enix! This game goes for the overly cartoon style that I think suits Marvel best. While the game is graphically nothing special, particularly the lack of anti-aliasing on surfaces hurts me as a person with a larger TV, it overall looks pretty damn good. And the characters. Some characters have their MCU incarnations as a pretty clear inspiration for the game, but for the most part the character designs are based off the comics, giving not exactly unique, but not as often portrayed versions of the characters. Another plus for me is the variety in characters. There's more slated to be coming down the line, but finally having the X-Men come back and serve a pretty meaningful role in the games is a huge deal, especially after how hard they've been removed from every other Marvel game. And not only that, but they managed to balance between the characters who are big in the movies and ones who are smaller and don't get as much attention. I flipped when I first saw Kamala Khan, and the inclusion of not as well known characters like the Inhumans and the Defenders is always a plus for me. So, how does this game play? Well, it's almost polarizingly similar to the old games, jank included. Ultimate Alliance is a beat 'em up with RPG elements. You basically spend your time beating up the mooks you're given to fight and leveling up your character's abilities afterwards. Enemies basically come in 3 forms: big dudes, small dudes, and bosses. And variety basically only comes from switching between the different characters. Ironically, it's a game that's made for 4 players that I find immensely more enjoyable by myself. Switching between 4 characters gives you more opportunities to figure out who you like and adds more variety to the game. Each character has a string of light attacks, a string of heavy attacks, 4 special moves, and an ultimate attack that can be performed in unison. These special moves vary a decent amount between characters, but do a very good job of explaining who the character is to someone who's not familiar with Marvel. However, some of these moves overlap, and it's kind of disappointing, but they can't all be winners. Attacks with overlapping properties can also be used at the same time as teammates to perform what are called synergy attacks. which are basically the same special moves but done at the same time with extra damage. One pretty big knock is that the camera never quite feels where you want it to be. In single player or online multiplayer, you can choose between having the camera right behind your characters or over the top, but neither one does the job quite as nicely as you'd want it to. There are around 30 characters who you're encouraged to switch between, but you are never quite given enough time to level them all up unless you spend all your in-game time with one team. The gameplay loop feels pretty tedious. These characters never get enough time to shine on their own without the time spent grinding with them. All things considered, they do a pretty good job making each character feel unique, but if they had dealt out characters more slowly, or perhaps even had less of them, I think each character would feel even more unique and have more staying power. However, if you want more time with your characters, you go to the post-game area known as the Infinity Rifts. These are like glorified challenges. Stuff like beat the boss under a certain amount of time, beat the boss with more enemies, beat all the dudes in this area, etc. With overall useless but pretty neat unlockables. New palette swaps, equipable ISO 8 power-ups, or XP cubes to beef up your other heroes. Personally, I've been rolling with Luke Cage, Kamala Khan, Spider-Gwen, and the Hulk. Some of my favorite heroes, and they work together pretty nicely. However, I also used the glitch to play with 4 Spider-Men, and it was more fun than you think. I think my biggest weakness when it comes to Ultimate Alliance 3 is how shockingly little I have to say about it. It's a sequel worthy of its name, that's for damn sure. And as weak as the gameplay might feel, the story, the postgame, and the characters make it up for me. This game is a strong 7 out of 10. Definitely pick this one up if you're a fan of the other games. If you're not, it's still at least a fun 10-hour romp. I'd wait for a sale though. Now with the announcement of all these new Marvel movies at Comic-Con, I will forever wait for a new Fantastic Four. See ya!